Hello everyone and welcome. This is our first Grow with Google presentation that we will be presenting this summer. We at the Montville Public Library were fortunate enough to recently receive a grant from Google, and so we are going to be exploring topics that are specifically related to sort of getting back into the workforce if COVID has harmed your work status in any way, and basically also building up your skills to make you a more attractive job candidate for the economy that we're in right now. So, obviously this virus has impacted our society in so many ways, and economically is one of the largest. And we know that, a lot of folks may have been laid off from their job or maybe facing furlough or some kind of disruption. And so what we're going to try to accomplish this summer is a series of presentations that we hope that you find are really helpful in terms of rebuilding your jobs and your skill sets. And so today we're going to start with something very fundamental, which is how to create a resume with Google Docs. Obviously, a resume is your first foot in the door, so to speak. It's the first impression that you will make to a prospective employer in almost all cases. And it's really important to make a fine-tuned and professional resume these days because, for one thing, so many resumes are now not initially seen by an actual person, but by an algorithm. And the algorithm is keying in on keywords. And if your resume doesn't have the keywords that they're looking for, you might not even get a chance to see your resume make it to a pair of human eyes. So crafting a strong resume is more important than ever. And today I hope to show you how to do that using Google Docs as your tool. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Get my slideshow started here. And so we're past our welcome. So this is what we would like a professional resume to look like. Now you'll notice it's got a little pop of color in it, and you want to make your resume visually appealing as well. And that's simply because if it does make it to a human, you want that human to catch their eye as they're looking at your resume. So resume, it's critical not only to have the content be strong, but also the presentation itself. And one thing we'll take a look at, assuming you're not a graphic designer or so inclined, is that Google Docs has some good templates that can help you make a really professional looking resume. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And so obviously you need a resume to apply for jobs, for internships, schools, scholarships. It's pretty much a universal tool. And if you've never made a resume before, if you're one of our young job seekers, you'll quickly learn to love and hate the resume, and you will keep reevaluating and keep updating it and keep rethinking it throughout your entire working career. It's if I had $1 for every version of my resume on my computer at home, I would be quite a wealthy person at this point. Unfortunately, I do not. So it's just one of those things, So as we described before, a resume gives the first impression of you. So obviously, on that ground alone, it's enormously important. You want that first impression to be memorable, strong. You want the reviewer to look at that resume and say, wow, this is a person I have to call. I would not be doing my due diligence trying to fill this position if I did not call this person. That's what you're looking to achieve with your resume. You want to describe your qualifications. And that seems easy at first, but really when you think about it, to try to create a one-page summary of your qualifications and present an accurate and complete picture and keeping it to that one page, that's actually very challenging. And it's important to try to keep the resume to one page because, again, you may be applying to a position with 100 applicants, 1,000 applicants, even more. And it's harder for you to make that impression if your resume is lengthy, just because the person or people reviewing it are pressed for time like we all are. So to keep it to that one page is extremely important. And so how do we summarize, especially if you're an experienced worker and you have a lengthy career history, how do you keep it to one page? You know, every year I increase my work history, I find it's more and more challenging to keep my resume to one page. So that's something we want to keep in mind as well. And finally, you want to show who you are and how you spend your time. So, you know, resume is obviously a very, formal thing. It's a formal summary, a formal presentation to your prospective employer. But you also want to, again, just like we talked about design and layout being important, you also want to make sure that your resume visually stands out, but also that they can get an impression a little bit of who you are as a person, as a human being, not just a series of education, skills, and qualifications, but that you're a three-dimensional being, you have varied interests, you're an interesting person. So you want to get all that color and all that richness in the resume as well. So again, it's a lot of detail and a lot of challenge to get into one piece of paper, or in this case, a virtual piece of paper. But that's the challenge we face. So let's sort of dig in and see how we can do that. And so here's our agenda. And again, this video, this presentation was designed to be sort of a live in-person event. Now, obviously, given the current situation and the fact that we have no in-person programming at the library at this time, that's not going to work. So there will probably be times where you're going to want to pause this video, where you might want to even stop it and come back to it another day. Of course, that's totally fine, because there is work for you to do as we go through this and as you build your resume. So again, completely feel comfortable with pausing, stopping, rewinding, whatever you need to do. But this is our basic agenda. We're going to brainstorm the experiences for your resume. We're going to create a draft resume in Google Docs, and then we're going to edit and format and polish your resume. So that's the basic structure that we're going to follow. So one thing that you need to create a Google Doc is a Google account. Now, many of you out there probably already have Gmail accounts. Now, a Gmail account is a Google account. They are one and the same. If you don't have a Google account, you're going to want to go to google.com and create one. And that will also be your Gmail address. You need a Gmail address to access Google Docs. So this is a requirement. It is free, of course. There is no charge for it. If you already have a Gmail account, great. If you don't, please go ahead and create one. Once you've created one, you're going to go ahead and you're going to click on that grid, and you're going to select Google Drive. So Google Drive, it's very useful. It is essentially a hard drive that you can access anywhere there's an internet connection from any device. And when you hear people talk about the cloud, quote unquote, that's what the cloud really is. The cloud is storage that you can access on the internet from anywhere. So you may have multiple locations you spend each day. You may have a workplace, you may have a home, you may have multiple homes. The Google Drive is going to give you the flexibility to revisit and revise this resume from wherever you happen to be at that moment. You could even do it on a smartphone. You could even do it on a tablet. So you can really work on your resume pretty much anywhere at any time once you put it on the cloud, which is what we're going to do. And so now let's talk about setting it up. And so here are the 5 basic sections that you're going to find in any resume. Obviously, you're going to lead off with contact information. You want the prospective employer to be able to get in touch with you, hopefully when they're interested in possibly hiring you for the position. You're going to want to list your experience, your work experience. You're going to want to list your educational experience. You're going to want to list your skills and your activities and accomplishments. And I just want to pause here for a minute. Activities and accomplishments. That's one that some people kind of gloss over or don't really pay much time or attention on. I highly advise you really think about that and really make sure you're putting your best foot forward there, because again, that activities and accomplishments area, that's where you're going to have the best opportunity to present a complete picture of yourself, a 3D person, not just a list of skills, experiences, and education. And that can be huge. If you can catch your recruiter's eye for any reason, maybe you have a shared interest or a shared hobby, that's all to the better. So don't give that the brush by. Really focus on that when we get there. And this is just highlighting the different sections of the resume so you can see them. Templates. So as I mentioned before, unless you take an interest in graphic design or or a hobby, or maybe even you're a professional designer, but for all the folks out there who don't fit into those categories, you might want to go with a template and you can tweak the template. You can change the colors, you can change the layouts, but if nothing else, the template is going to give you a good place to start from and to build off of. Or you can simply keep the template as it is. It is up to you how you want to do it. But I would definitely recommend at least starting with the template, because professional designers worked on these. And so unless you are a designer yourself, they're probably better than anything you're going to be able to come up with on your own. But again, feel free to alter it in any way you see fit. If there's something about it you don't like, or something you think makes it more personal to you, don't hesitate to do that. But this is going to be a good way to make sure that your resume is visually attractive and that it presents the information in a very clear and easy to read format. So that's a good place to start. This is how you can choose a template in Google Docs, and you can follow the animation on the screen. But you're basically going to click on New, and then the arrow, and then you're going to select From a Template, General, and then a Resume option. And you can cycle through the different options. You could try to find one that works for you or that you like best. You might want to experiment with more than one. But that is how you access the template. And I should also pause here to say that if anything in this presentation causes you to have a question or you need to follow up, you can email the following email address, mtpl@montvillelibrary.org, mtpl@montvillelibrary.org, and I'll review any questions you have, and I can get back to you via email or over the phone. So please don't hesitate, or if you hit a snag along the way and you need some help, please reach out to me at that email address, mtpl@montvillelibrary.org, and I'll be happy to follow up with you on that. So your skills and contact information. Now, this again should seem very simple, your contact information. But a lot of people, and I've seen actually, because I have reviewed some resumes along the way myself, I've had situations where a candidate is somebody that our organization was interested in, and then I'll call the number or send an email, and the email bounces back saying address invalid, or we call the phone number and it goes nowhere, it even goes to a different person. By that I mean, especially if you've been using a resume for a while, make sure that information is up to date. You would think that that's a no-brainer, but again, I've had multiple situations where we ultimately couldn't reach out to a person because their contact information was not correct. So double check it, triple check it, make sure it's up to date and relevant. Very, very important. And you're going to definitely want to include a phone number and an email address in this day and age. They're absolutely both essential. And you're going to want to make sure, particularly, that your email address is what I would say professional friendly. So if your email address is your dog's name buried a bone 2002 at hotmail.com, just think of it as sort of like passing your business card across the table. You want that business card to look professional. You want this contact information to look professional as well. So if your email address currently is a personal address that isn't what you would call professional, I highly recommend creating a new Gmail account with a professional address. Maybe it's a variation on your name, anything that's sort of putting your best foot forward. Highly, highly recommend. Okay, so now let's dig in a little bit more into work experience and education. So here's sort of the core information you're going to want to include in every work experience entry in your resume. Obviously, the name of your employer, the type of work. Now that can be tough because some jobs are very cut and dried, But other jobs have a lot of different responsibilities and they're not easily, or they have titles that may not be obvious to an outside person looking at your resume. For example, I'll give one example from my own life. For many years, I held a position in Apple retail called Pro. Now, a lot of people on the outside are familiar with Genius and what they do, but Pro is not as transparent. It doesn't have as much, I don't know, glamour or PR behind it. So basically, what a Pro in Apple retail is it's a sales lead. So you're sort of not only selling, but you're also driving others to be their best salesperson they can be. And so, when I was building up my resume and creating it, I didn't want to put Pro because a person looking at that is not going to know what that means unless they were in Apple retail themselves. And so I simply called it a sales lead because that's something that is a lot more transparent, a lot more relatable. So if you're in that situation where you have a specific job title that may not be clear to somebody who's outside of the organization you're currently working for or worked for in the past, definitely consider sort of thinking about how would I put this in terms that everyone can understand. That would be very transparent to everyone. Location, again, important, obviously. The dates of your employment, important. And if you're still at the current place, you obviously just put present as the end date. And again, here's the challenge, description of what you did. Now you'll notice in this example, there's 3 bullet points. That's kind of what I've always tried to keep myself to as well. If you go beyond 3 bullet points, again, you might deter your reader or your reviewer from reading any further. Their eyes may glaze over. Try to keep it to 3 bullets, as hard as that is, especially if it's a job you've been in for a long time. You might really have to think about and take some time to reflect on what were the 3 most essential things I can say I did at this job, the 3 most core duties. Or in some cases, if you're applying for a job that may be not a direct replacement for the current job you're in, what are the 3 things or core functions I performed at that job that are going to be the most translatable and relevant to the job I'm applying for now? And so again, this is something you're probably going to want to take some time to think about when you're creating your resume. It's something that, particularly for the job you're currently in, you're probably really going to want to think long and hard about what are the 3 things I want to put in there. So that's that. Measurable details are very important too. So sort of just saying, again, drawing on my own life experience here, if I simply said in my presentation of my experience as a pro at Apple retail, if I simply said, I sold Apple products on a daily basis, great, but does that really tell your person who's reviewing your resume how you really perform that task? Or is it simply a check mark on a list? And so I would say things sort of like, led my store in iPhone sales for 6 consecutive quarters. So that's putting a little bit more detail. Like, hey, now this person can infer, okay, not only did this person sell iPhones or sell Apple products on a daily basis, they were driven, they were accomplished, they were outperforming their peers. And that's a much richer picture of what somebody might have accomplished than simply saying what they did. So the more detail and the more specifics you can include in those bullet points, the better. And of course, you want to put your best foot forward. This is not a time to be shy. If you have amazing metrics or measurable details to share them by all means. Do not shy away from that. So next, we're going to move on to listing your education history. So here are, again, the core pieces of information you want to include with that. Where was the school? When did you start? When did you graduate? And what was your GPA? And again, if you're currently enrolled in that school, you'd simply put something like you see in the example here, diploma in progress or degree in progress or whatever is important. you want to get that in there, obviously. But again, just like with the work experience, the more detail and color you can put into it, the better. So if you had a particular path that you're on, say in a high school setting or a higher education setting or a major, you want to obviously put that in there. You want to let people know that while you were getting educated, you had a vision, you had a path, you had a focus you were on. That you were not just, filling a seat in a classroom, that you were there to enrich yourself through education to ultimately achieve vocational or professional goals. So any detail you can put it in there. And so this is what it starts to look like. So you'll notice it's concise, it's to the point. The experience section, even though there's 3 jobs there, is nice and short. It fits well on the page. And that's a product of really doing that work that I talked about in terms of thinking about those 2 to 3 bullet points for each job and how you're going to concisely and relevantly present what you did at those experiences to your recruiter, as well as the education, keeping it to the absolute essential information. And that's how you can stick to a 1-page resume, even if you have a lengthy work or educational history. And so now we're going to put in more details. So we're going to move on to adding skills, activities, and awards. So you're going to list your skills. And skills can basically fall into 2 categories, hard and soft. So hard skills are those technical and job-specific skills and abilities. The ability to drive a truck requiring a CDL. The ability to install a hot water heater. Those sorts of things, those sorts of qualifications, skills, and abilities that are germane to that role or that job. Hard skills are really something that are specific. They're not universal across all people. I want to know how to install a hot water heater if you probably put the diagrams and instructions in front of me for 6 months. So these are obviously enormously important to highlight in your resume. And again, here's some examples of it. Playing an instrument, word processing, coding, certifications, writing, web page design, things that you really have to practice and apply your craft to become a master at. Those are the hard skills. And then there's soft skills, and soft skills are more universal. They're more about relations to other people than they are about technical skills. And let's look at some examples of those. Customer service, amazing soft skill, and that's one that's so relevant to so many different jobs and industries. You're a good listener, you're hardworking, you're helpful, you're organized, you have a positive attitude, you have a good sense of responsibility and teamwork. These are the kind of things that you want to highlight because work is always collaborative, even in this COVID largely work at home era. Being able to work and relate to other people is essential. And somebody could have the greatest hard skills in the world. They could be the best in their field. But if they are seriously lacking in soft skills, that can completely undermine their technical ability. And so it's something that you definitely want to highlight, and you definitely want to, if you do get to an interview, it's something you definitely want to get across to your interviewers. They want to know that you're going to basically play well with others. So the soft skills, they seem less impressive maybe on the surface than the hard skills are, but they are very much as important and very relevant. And so now your next activity, if you will, is to sit down and do some really hard thinking and create a list of 5 to 7 hard and soft skills that summarize you well. Important to really, again, keep it to a concise list so we can stick to our 1-page format. And so you're going to probably have to do a lot of weighing and editing to think about how do I boil myself down to a list of 5 to 7 hard and soft skills. So again, and I can't say this enough, if you do the work up front in creating a good resume, it's going to pay enormous dividends. It's not something to rush through or do quickly on the fly. It's something to really ponder and reflect on. And again, if you need to pause the video here, you should probably pause the video here as you work out your list. So here we'll have a little challenge, which is matching skills to a job description. This is an essential, again, as we talked earlier about the way that so much of the resume review now is performed by AI or automation. Matching your skills and making them relevant to the job description is enormously important, or your resume may never even make it to somebody's screen or desk. So here, let's take a look at this job summary. Variety Community Field takes great pride in providing a safe and fun venue for various community events throughout the year. Job experience is not always necessary, but applicants must display a good work ethic, sense of teamwork, and a willingness to help strengthen our community through the dynamic and diverse field of parks and recreation. Responsible for greeting patrons, taking tickets, and providing customer service during sporting events, movies on the field, festivals, or concerts. Obviously, this example was made in the pre-COVID world, but let's put that aside for a moment and just think about this. Now, you'll notice that the relevant areas have been highlighted. So you want to read through a description like this, read through the job summary, and really focus on what are they looking for? What skills are they looking for me to have to be effective in this role? And then also in the primary responsibilities, you'll see they highlighted a couple things here. Answer customer questions, right? So that ties back into customer service focus. Clean ticket area. Again, focusing on your sort of responsibility and work ethic, because that's a thankless task that probably needs to be done multiple times a day. And if you slack off on it even a little, the results of that slacking off are probably going to become very apparent to everyone around you. So that, again, is just a very crucial thing to focus on. And now we're going to move on to listing awards and activities. And we want you to create a list of 3 to 5 awards or activities. And you see in this example here, we have active member of yearbook club, a photograph that was published in the city newspaper, and they were an employee of the month. So nice award, nice activity showing that they're interested in photography. An active member of the yearbook club, so maybe they're interested in graphic design, publication, editorial functions, that sort of thing. So again, your challenge here, and it's not easy, it's again to think of 3 to 5 awards or activities that you think best capture who you are as a person. And you might have to really take some time to think back over the history of your whole life to come up with that. But that is your challenge. And so now that we've thought about all these different components and everything that goes into that one-page document, now you're ready to attempt to complete the first draft of your resume, keeping in mind all the things we've discussed. And if you need to go back and review, please feel free to. So we're going to go again over completing the experience section. So all the things we talked about, keeping it to 2 to 3 bullets, all the core information that you need to include, presenting it, not only what you did, but how well you did it in a measurable way if possible. All of those things go into that section. And again, we're highlighting all of those, the dates. Active verbs, that is important. You don't want to write a resume in the passive voice. Writing in the passive voice is generally a bad idea, but it's particularly a bad idea when you're presenting a resume because it presents you in a way that's not dynamic and attention-getting and kind of in a sort of non-engaging, kind of flat way. So use active verbs. Washed and dried an average of 12 cars per 4-hour shift, that sort of thing. Consider the verb tense. So if this was a job you did a long time ago, you definitely want to probably use the past tense for your verbs. If it's a job you're currently a part of and currently performing, you probably want to use present tense verbs. It just makes logical sense, right, as you think it through. And avoid I or me. So don't say, I plan activities like reading and playing games as one example. Just simply drop that out of your description of your experience. Not necessary. And so education and awards. You're going to go ahead and activities. You're going to build those sections based along the lines that we discussed earlier. And again, if you need to review them, feel free to rewind the video. Once you've done that and you have all your components in place, now it's time to edit and format. So to basically polish. And a resume is definitely not a one draft document. It's not something you can set it and forget it. After you get everything down on paper, then it's time to really drill down and make it even better. And like I mentioned earlier, as you go throughout your life, it's something you need to revisit frequently over and over again. It's a pain, but it will pay off. And so read through each section carefully. Obviously check for any typos, grammatical errors, spelling errors, clunky wording, that sort of thing. Make sure everything is correct and accurate. You don't want to put down something that's not really accurate or correct, and then on the interview, you're asked about a specific bullet point and suddenly you're on the hot seat because that bullet point doesn't reflect reality. You don't want to be in that position. Check for grammar like we talked about. Look for those strong action verbs, that active voice that we talked about previously. Formatting changes. So if you think you can make it look better or prettier or more visually engaging, feel free to go ahead and do that. Make sure everything is lined up and aligned correctly and nicely. Like we said before, spell check. And running spell check, definitely important, but spell check does not catch everything. And I think we can all remember a painful experience in our past where spell check let us down. Don't let that happen. Do not just rely on the red line, also rely on reading through, or if you can get a friend or a family member or a colleague to read through as well, they might catch something you missed. That's always a good idea too. Okay, sharing your resume. So this again is where the ability of saving it on a cloud like Google Drive is a good thing. It's very easy to email it to someone, to embed it anywhere, to create a link to it, to make a copy of it, to email it as an attachment, etc. And then one last time before you share it with anyone, you're going to want to review it. Again, I know, it's a pain, but you just want to make sure. You only get one chance to make a first impression, as the cliche goes. You want to make sure that you're going to make the best impression possible. And that sort of takes us to the end of this workshop. I really hope you use these tools to make an amazing resume that's going to catch everyone's eye and show the whole world how great Montville is and how great our residents are, because you are. And again, I just can't say this enough. If you have any questions or need help with anything, do not hesitate to email me at mtpl@montvillelibrary.org, mtpl@montvillelibrary.org, and I'd be more than happy to help you out with any questions you might need or any assistance you might need or have to receive. It was great talking to you today, and go out there, create that great resume, put that great first foot forward, and I'll see you next week with another Grow with Google presentation. Thank you.